So we are coming to the last lecture of this morning. It will be presented by Dr. Eugen Drewermann, and he is certainly one of the foremost non-traditional thinkers who emerged from the Catholic Church. He is a priest and psychotherapist, and he went much beyond what he seemed to have experienced as a straitjacket of the church. He conceived his own psychology and religious philosophy well within the great Christian tradition, but much beyond any fundamentalist belief. And he has documented his insights in numerous books, also one which he published jointly with His Holiness, which actually came from some 700th year jubilee of the Swiss Confederation, where he met His Holiness here in Zürich, and they had 2 lectures on the same event, and they are published together in a book. And so today he is here now for just the 150 years jubilee of our school. But again, a similar constellation, and I'm looking forward to his lecture on fear and anxiety in today's world, a Christian view. Ich habe 2 Seelen.
Your Holiness, ladies and gentlemen, first I will have to beg your pardon for my deplorable English. Latin would be a little bit easier for me, but I'll try, of course, to do my best in respect to your patience. The theme of fear and anxiety is an elevator through the 3 floors of a skyscraper. On the ground, en parterre, the fear of animals. On the 1st floor, the fear of children, and in the 2nd floor, the fear, or better, the anxiety to be a human being, but all by turns. Everybody knows what is fear. Crossing a street, you see a motor car driving by high speed just in your direction. You loudly crying, "Jump away." Some seconds later, you feel that you have not had fear, but you have been fear. Your legs are trembling. The color of your skin is yellow-green. Sweat is covering your neck and armpits. Your heart is throbbing. Your breath is flying, and this bodily situation is fear, an emergency case reaction, in the words of Walter Buchanan. On the biological or biopsychological aspect, the emotion of fear is a warning signal in order to avoid an external danger by mobilization of all the organism for flight or fight. Remembering the neurological explanation, there are 3 parts in our brain who control our behavior in fear. It is a prefrontal cortex which perceives a situation as dangerous. Corresponding feelings in the so-called limbic system, especially in the amygdala and the hippocampus, are combined with the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus releases the cascade of hormones along the stress axis. The amygdala activates the hypothalamus for releasing of corticotropin-releasing hormone, CRH, and this hormone activates the hypophyse for releasing adrenocorticotropin hormone, ACTH, and so the hypophyse activates the adrenal cortex for producing cortisol. In parallel to that, the brainstem activates the sympathetic nerve system. The effect is a release of noradrenaline for fight and adrenaline for flight. The result of all this is the emotion of fear or anger, a psychosomatic condition in which soul and body are an indivisible union. In consequence of this, against attacks of fear and panic, some psychopharmaca are helpful, like the tricyclical antidepressiva, benzodiazepines, and more the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But fear is more. What we recognize as a case of danger is often a matter of our remembrance. It is, pick this three, the hippocampus, which organizes the remembrance of various contexts of danger in past, and also the perirenal cortex. Especially the amygdala gets the inputs from these both systems and from the prefrontal cortex, the sensitive cortex, and the sensitive thalamus. Following Joseph Ledoux, the amygdala is a knife in the wheel of fear. And the amygdala will never forget. We are carrying oaths to Essen after we have heard the words of Professor Müller. This installation of our fear reaction is naturally a long-dated result of evolution. Ludwig von Bertalanffy could say, by the metazoa came the death, by the nerve system came the pain, and by the consciousness came the fear. Therefore, the history of fear begins by the first steps in the evolution of consciousness. Approaching to this point, and according to Rudolf Biltz, we can distinguish four original situations of fear, who are established as well in the soul of animals as in the soul of human beings. Let us speak at first about the segregation fear. This picture. You see a little monkey in a situation of loneliness, and immediately you can understand its feelings. Jaak Panksepp has spoken from the fear of abandonment. You see a little child who has lost his mother, and you know what it is: segregation fear, abandonment fear. You are alone like a motherless child. All friends are hidden behind the horizon. You are living in exile. You have lost your social group. In this case, all human beings are disposing of a special cry, the so-called cuckoo cry. You cry, hello, or qui vive. In Hebrew, it is the same word for being alone and being lost, abat. A sheep segregated from the herd is condemned to ruin. Let's speak a second about the fear in face of a predator. This was the situation in which you were in face of the motor car. We see an antelope at the water pool, and it is clear this animal must keep the vigilance, particularly in this moment, because the predators are near. This vigilance, this readiness for mortal danger, must not leave the life of a living being. Everywhere the death is lying in wait. Call with this kind of fear under human conditions a paranoia. Then must we say that the principle of enemy avoiding is nearer to us than, for example, the depression. But how to live in a world where the predator can wait for you every time and everywhere. It is an agriological form to see the world, this paranoid perception of reality, but it is based upon the first steps in evolution of consciousness. At third, we speak about the fear of victimization by expulsion in case of guilt. You see a gull, a sea youth, with oil past its feathers. Guilty is a captain of a so-called cheap flag tanker. Cheap, of course, only for the oil-producing trust. But all the swarm of the birds will fall upon this one innocent animal and will attack it. The biological reason for this behavior is to extirpate all what seems to be sick. It is an objective rule without any subjects. The question is not whether you are responsible or not. The visible fact is deciding, and the total group or the mob is called up for punishment and revenge. Without any doubt, the roots of morality and justice, take as an example the death penalty in USA in modern time, are lying here. In his novel The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne has described how a beautiful woman of firm character, Hester Prynne, must stay at the pillory because she is accused as an adulteress, and all her life long she must bear the letter A as adulteress on her breast. This is victimization by social exile. All the others are your enemies, but you, by yourself, you are an outlaw, for now and ever. At first, we speak about the fear of hunger and starving. Also, this situation is well known for us. You see little birds in the nest with open beaks, begging for food, or you see in TV the caravans of misery, the endless columns of refugees, missing water, victuals, and clothes. In all these situations, as well animals as human beings feel fear in the proximity of death. But there is an important difference. Our reason, our intelligence, our ability for foreseeing the consequences of our condition makes all the limited situations of fear infinite on principle. Finally, the death is unescapable. And in each moment, the death is sitting beside us, or like a condor circulating over us. What wonder that we are searching definitive solutions. Against the fear of segregation, we can identify ourselves with the expectations and furtherances of the society we are living in. We stop our individual existence. We become nulls without any personal meaning. We are the generality. We lose ourselves in fear for being lost, or the fear in face of a predator. Just now, we are remembering on the 6th of August 1945, when Major Tibbets killed more than 100,000 inhabitants of Hiroshima in a few seconds. But now, as before, the USA spent each day more than $1 billion for more and more murderous weapons, constantly in defense of a possible aggressor. What is normal in the life of animals is evidently paranoid in the human history, this everlasting prolongation of the story of Cain and Abel. Nico Tinbergen could say that the human species is the only one who has learned that killing the enemy is the only final solution of an aggressive conflict. In other words, the factor of fear is much more developed in human brain than anywhere else. And paradoxically, our intelligence is a reason for it. Or let us take the fear of victimization. It can lead us to the effort to become as perfect and immaculate as God, beings without any false step, angels more than men, and therefore worse than the devils. The monumental crusade against the evil in our time seems to be an example for this attitude. And last not least, the fear of hunger. We see worldwide more than 50 billions of human beings dying each year by hunger and the effects of hunger. Under them about 6 billion children younger than 5 years old. But we are unable to share the goods of world fraternally with each other. The fear of hunger is too strong, and this fear spreads the hunger over 2/3 of human mankind. In all these problems, the original fear in the soul of animals becomes infinite. The reactions of our limbic system get out of control if we are unable to solve the infinity of fear. How to do so, in my eyes, is the essential project of religion. We try to give an answer to the question of the infinity of fear by confidence in infinite. The method for is the language of symbols. Against the fear of segregation, we hear the words of an absolute invitation. The parable, for example, of the Good Shepherd, who is carrying the lost sheep home in St. Luke chapter 15. Against the fear of a predator, who is at last the brother death. All religions are teaching that our soul, our person, is in the hands of God in eternity. Against the fear of victimization, we hope for forgiveness. And against the fear of hunger, we are taught to share all what we have with those who have not enough to live. Till this point, we have spoken about the fear of our evolutionary heritage. But the individual experiences of fear we make are the impressions when we come into this world and even before we were born. It seems to be sure that the glucocorticoids, like cortisol, can pass the placenta and can disturb the development of the fetal brain, the brain of the unborn child. And especially in the first months and years after the birth, we are learning the fear of our mother. Picture 6 can show you how different the emotions of a newborn monkey may be, whether the mother is resting in herself or she is excited by fear. And we have heard, the amygdala will never forget. The fear we learn from our parents can stay in a rational correspondence to reality, but already this fear can be also an erotic one. In later time, along special themes and conflicts in childhood, the fear to be punished by mother or father can lead an infant into neurosis. And we see the old classical problems reactivated, now in individual life. The fear of segregation. On the next picture, we see a monkey in the laboratory of Philip Harlow, about 50 years ago now. In an experiment as cruel as inhuman, this monkey has had to grow up absolutely segregated from his mother. The fear of segregation and loneliness will accompany this monkey all his life long. Look his arms instead of the arms of his mother. Look the wall of his prison instead of the body of his mother. This is loneliness. This is segregation. Psychoanalysts will call it a schizoid fear, always near to the paranoia. The fear of hunger is an exquisite problem in the older conflicts of depression. The fear of a predator is quite similar to the sadistic ideology of compulsion neurosis, and the fear of victimization by expulsion can build up a hysteric character with its endless flight into community. In each case, another human being can be more dangerous for us than the death by itself. Even and especially in religions, the fear of father and mother may be projected into the figure of God, and so perpetuated forever. In the eyes of the Catholic Church, the Pope is representing the patriarchal position of the Almighty God, and it should be a mortal sin to entertain any doubts on this church-made God. In fact, the message of Jesus was completely in contrast to this fearful dependence from a paternal authority. The belief in God should make a man free, free from all earthly forms of fear, free from all external authorities, free for himself, self-assertive and open for love and happiness. But exactly here, in the heart of freedom, all fear may be converted into anxiety. It was a Danish philosopher, how we have heard, Søren Kierkegaard, who has worked out the assertion that freedom and self-consciousness are identical with anxiety. All fear has a concrete subject. The subject of anxiety is nothing, not anything. Philosophically seen, freedom is a synthesis between time and eternity, between necessity and possibility, between the definite and the indefinite. And this situation, which is our essence, we are not held fast, we are not stabilized, and so we will try to escape the freedom by deforming our existence. All what we call neurosis is a special kind of such a deformation of our existence. We flee the indefinite, and we are living in the paranoid world we have spoken about it. Or we flee the definite, and we are homeless everywhere, always longing for the unreachable eternity, a romantic feeling we find in depression. Or we flee the possibility we want to be sitting in the straight waistcoat of necessity, doing only what we must do, executing only our job, just like Major Tibis over Hiroshima, a criminal with an immaculate conscience. Or we flee the necessity and we jump into the world like into a theater of changing castings. In all these directions of flight from the freedom, we never arrive ourselves. Avoiding anxiety, we are anxiety. And as a theologian, you may call this situation really the original sin, Adam and Eve in the exile of existence, far from the tree in the middle of the paradise. So the question is urgent, how we can come back into the lost paradise, how we can find the synthesis between heaven and earth, which we are or which we should be, how we can reach the truth of ourselves. I remember the film Coup d'une, telling the life of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. A Chinese general came into the potala and announced, "We have come to here in order to deliver you." And the boy who was the Dalai Lama said, that is what you can't do, General. To become free, that I can make only by myself. As a Christian theologian, let me say, what is able to make us free, so that we endure the freedom that we are, is only an unconditional acceptance, is what we call divine grace. In one of his last poems, in John Marr and Other Sailors, Herman Melville has expressed his hope and his desire for another, for a better world. During the stars of northern sky are sinking down into the sea, the cross of south becomes visible, and the moon begins to change its course, walking now from right to left. Somewhere, this mirror symmetrical world must lie, just in contrast to this barbaric world of endless wars, of punishments, to this world of hunger and exploitation. He wrote, O love, these oceans vast, O love, it is as death were past. I thank you very much, and I thank the Dalai Lama. 2 days after 9/11 in Bari in South Italy, I saw you in TV in an interview with an American reporter. And you said, this is what happened on 9/11. It can be a big chance for non-violence. Never I have heard such a word. For me, it is an example to be free. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Drewermann, for your Western view. And I felt this morning, it's astonishing how converging the ideas are from the different sides. There are very subtle differences which I don't want to point out at this moment, but perhaps we can discuss about these differences very briefly by coming back to the front row. If His Holiness could briefly come to this seat, and if the three speakers could briefly come here, so that we spend a very few last minutes on discussing about this subject. And Dr. Drewermann and you too. Yeah. I don't want to structure this very brief discussion. I just ask you who wants to ask whom a question or make a comment.
Well, since I'm a big mod, I have a very short comment on freedom and anxiety. I think the freedom that goes with anxiety in terms of facing with choice, doubts, hesitation, that's actually somehow be the toy of our wild thoughts. It's like, no, a boat that is drifting by the currents and the wind is not freedom, it's drifting. Freedom means to take the helm and navigate in the direction you want. So in a way, inner freedom should not give rise to anxiety, but precisely to inner strength. That's one small point, because we could debate on that. The second point I forgot to mention in terms of the antidote of fear is the importance of compassion and altruism. Because when your mind is precisely pervaded with altruistic and loving kindness, then the suffering brings more courage and determination to act for it. When you are entirely self-centered, then of course any difficult situation increases your anxiety and fear. So in that sense, compassion and openness to burst that small bubble of ego grasping is also true compassion, one of the best ways to have a strong and mind and then overcome this feeling of insecurity.
Thank you. Who likes to add something?
I would say that for us, the idea and the reality of freedom, of course, is a good thing, because we can do what we want. But this is only the surface. After Søren Kierkegaard, and especially after Sartre, we feel that the freedom lies upon our soul like a heavy burden, often a too heavy burden. And so we need a solution to endure our freedom. And this is, in my eyes, the central problem of all religions. How can we use our freedom instead of flee the freedom by anxiety?
Perhaps we don't even have to restrict it to a religion. We can say it in a broader sense in all ethics, in philosophies of life, which go perhaps beyond even a religious belief.
True freedom is not to do what one wants, whatever comes in one's mind. Then you are a slave of your thoughts. Freedom is to be free from afflictive emotion that distort reality and that makes you a victim of your own thoughts.
Let us say this is a second freedom.
Okay.
You like to add something to this, His Holiness?
다시 시작하시면 가 대신에 저 자도 세레 주바 세디 그 책직이 그 타가타가 그다 고용 거 맞도 뛰야 다 그게 유디 체주 먹고 있죠 저보다 유디 책 샤이드잖아요 체주 찍 샤인 거 전신 파세인 자자가 그 책직이 그 고알란다 다음에 샤이드 되지 그 용어를
Nothing substantial to add, but just a thought. You know, one of the problems that we confront in a kind of an intercultural dialogue like this is the limitations of language, and in trying to understand and describe the complexity of human existence. So, because by language, by its very nature, is very selective, you know, and it selects and focuses on the particular characteristics from this complexity, and presents one angle. And because of this, sometimes when we use the term like freedom, it may mean differently in different contexts and differently to different people as well.
Yeah, I think all the three speakers this morning have put it in a scientific context and tried to understand it scientifically. And then it's perhaps easier, but one also loses at the same time. One loses certain more emotional aspects which are hard to put into a scientific language.
패자도 freedom 시대디 내 과로 세비나 직다 가서 그게 패자도 freedom 디 catchable 차야디 다 그냥 디 독촉 라와 매버치니 직다 그 고긴 써야지 그러다 고긴 써야지 숙청부 예배 그도는 띵나도 만들어 예배 인사 디 가서 그래 가서 리액션 수치 애는 freedom 시대디 catchable 시대지 체요이나 저들이 뭐 인도잖아요. 그 간다 라완스야게 동다 라완 매버스야 민두부 차. 자자가 민두부 차에서는 다 라완스야디 민두부도 동해도 민두부 차로 왔다. 자자가 라완스잖아요. 케요. 지 가서 그게 상부지 실샤베 타다 애는 소소 가이네다 제초고 그래서 디시고 수도 맞아. 그러나 라완스는 도에 제초서로 강전제 제초서로 애지 아이나서 되고 라완스 지금 거.
Again, related to this concept of freedom, His Holiness was saying that to his mind, the reason why we cherish freedom so much is because we see its opposite, the lack of freedom, to be something that is undesirable. imprisonment or lack of freedom is something that is undesirable, like suffering that we all, instinctively wish to avoid. And since this is part of our disposition, we put a premium to freedom. And so there is a kind of a qualitative moral underpinning to our choice of freedom, because we believe that the freedom opens the way to happiness that we seek. So if this is the case, then by definition, freedom should really be understood more in a kind of an ethical sense of something that promotes well-being, positive, rather than the simple notion of the choice to do anything that one wishes.
Exactly. Yeah, freedom makes only sense when it's combined with responsibility. That's what is important.
Yes.
Otherwise, I mean, just for freedom to play around, that is not positive.
Freedom.
But how you can understand the fear and anxiety, you will find a method to solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And here I see a difference, maybe an important difference, in the same way between Buddhism and Christianism. Look, the picture of the little monkey without his mother. Look, a little child without his mother. Look, a neurotic person, full of fear. And it is impossible to make with him a meditation to become self-conscious, self-assertive. It is impossible. Here in Zurich, C.G. Jung has said, I think 50 years ago, that in East Asia, the Buddhism is wonderful. But in Europe, for our neurotic persons, we need at first deep psychology. We must meet another person who loves us unconditionally. This person is our bride, our woman, our husband, and in the background of all, in the interpretation of Christianity, it is God as a father, as a mother, as a love, without any rejection. This personal idea of solution seems to be a different, but I suppose it is not a different in reality.
Professor Möller, he wanted to
I have a more personal question to Mathieu Ricard. I mean, we talked about the straitjacket of anxiety we're in and all have our neuroses. Now, you come from basically a Western background and chose your present role. Which was the driving force to do that? Was it the question we're just discussing about anxiety, neurosis, and freedom? What was it?
Not really. Okay. It's a source of inspiration. You meet wonderfully gifted people, and I have the chance to meet some great artists, philosopher to my father, artist to my mother, to some other uncles, explorers, and scientists in my own limited career. And also musicians and things like that. You would love to play the piano like Glenn Gould, but you may not necessarily want to be what he was. He was a very tormented person. You find wonderful person among scientists, you find also a little bit more difficult people, just as among gardeners. But I think what a truly inspiring person is someone who is the messenger becomes the message. It shows what lies at the end of the path, and the teaching and what the person is, there should be no discrepancy. And then it becomes a very profound source of inspiration. So when I found that, I thought in a very scientific way, in the sense of experimenting and trying and finding, following a consistent path, that to become a better human being, or try to do so, somehow, at that time, it inspired a little bit more than continuing to map the gene of Escherichia coli, which of course is great. So I think mostly the living example of what it could be to become a good human being was a tremendous source of inspiration, and definitely I'm so happy I made the choice early enough. And I'm happy to come back to science to show that mind training really matters and that it can help us to precisely go on that path.
I think we shouldn't solve all the problems this morning, answer all the questions, otherwise you have nothing to do this afternoon. And we have another 2 hours this afternoon, and there is a lunch break now. There are some invited ones with a green dot upstairs in the Dozentenfoyer, and the others will find food everywhere here around and be back in time. We will start exactly on 2 o'clock, so be 10 minutes earlier in the room here and enjoy your lunch break.
Community,